Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 23rd episode of By the Drip. This podcast is about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the amazing people we meet through the story of coffee. I'm your host, David Crosby, founder and CEO of ROSSO COFFEE ROASTERS. Today's guest is Suneal Pabari, co-founder of the Roasters Pack and Leaderboard Coffee. And in our conversation, Suneal talks about starting the Roasters Pack, a coffee subscription service that delivers 3 unique coffees from different roasters each month. He opens up about the initial struggles with time management and logistics while running the business solo and how he overcame those challenges. We discuss the large surge in home brewing and the significant increase in subscribers during 2020 and how Suneal managed the sudden growth. Then Suneal and his co-founder took the opportunity to create Leaderboard, a worldwide coffee tasting competition that combines fun and education. And it is a ton of fun, and you should sign up and give it a go. So don't miss out on this insightful conversation with Suneal, filled with valuable lessons about starting a coffee business and the personal and professional growth that comes from it. How did you get into the coffee industry? What made you start Roasters Pack?
Yeah, so I was living about an hour outside of Toronto. I graduated university about 2 or 3 years after university. I had a full-time job at Loblaws in marketing. Did that for about a year and was like, okay, I see where this is going. I don't know if I want to do this forever. So I quit my job and was like, let me just see if I can be my own boss and start my own business. And so I dabbled in a few different things. A couple of things like didn't really go anywhere.
What are those few things? What were they?
So my dad is an accountant and I was like, let me try and grow my dad's accounting business. And I set up some digital marketing stuff and that was fun. But then he started wanting me to do accounting and I was like, I'm not doing accounting. This is not what I want to do with my life. And so I got him some clients and was like, okay, let me move on and try something else. I got into photography and videography. So I started a photography and videography business. So I don't know, just we got lucky, we got some clients and that helped pay the bills. So Maple Leaf Foods was hiring us, which was cool because we did a bunch of internal projects for them. But I did it, and I think videography and photography sounds really fun. It's kind of a flashy industry, but I also didn't really find that interesting. So I started dabbling in other projects. I started a lens e-commerce business. This is a deep cut here. And so I started this for 2 months, and it was a drop shipping business.
Like glasses?
Camera lenses.
For cameras.
Yeah. So I was nerdy about photography and videography, and I felt like maybe there could be an improvement in the experience, but lenses are really expensive. And so I had to do drop shipping, and drop shipping businesses are not the best businesses to start. They're you can't really control the entire experience. So from the customer's point of view, it doesn't really work out really well. Anyways, I did it for a few months and realized okay, there's some challenges here. And then I wanted to buy coffee online and I realized no one was doing a good job of coffee online. So I figured why not try and scratch my own itch? And so that was the start of the Roasters Pack. I just dove into the coffee industry without knowing a ton about coffee, just being a curious consumer and realizing hey, no one is making a product that gets me excited. I started the Roasters Pack 10 years ago in 2014 and the internet in 2014 was a whole different place. It was still really early days. Shopify was barely a thing. And so it was hard to create websites and therefore not a lot of people were doing e-commerce well. So I figured, why not make a product that would get me excited as someone who wants to learn more about coffee? And that's what led me to starting the Roasters Pack.
Was there a coffee that got you in? Do you remember drinking a coffee that got you into coffee or an experience and then kind of led you down this road?
Yeah. So the cliche experience, I went on vacation to Hawaii,
You went to Hawaii? That doesn't sound
Hawaii.
cliche.
I feel that's the peak coffee people who say they really like coffee. I went to Italy but it's because it was just beautiful and you were on vacation. That's why this coffee tasted so good.
Yes.
But that did get me started in terms of wanting to explore more. And Detour, I think, was the closest coffee roaster to me, but they were a 45-minute drive from where I lived. So I think I went there and I grabbed some beans, but it was just it was cool, but it was inconvenient. And then that's what led me to search online and see if there was someone doing something that could help me solve this problem.
And so when you're talking about Roasters Pack, what does that mean? We got listeners, all over the world here. They might not know. It's obviously very popular in Canada, but might not know everywhere else.
Yeah. So the Roasters Pack is a coffee subscription. Every month we send people 3 different coffees from 3 different roasters. So it's a really cool way to explore different roasters, learn about them, see what you like and see what you don't like. We have a bunch of different sizes now, but the first version was smaller bags. So it was like a really cool way to sample different coffees. And I found that was one of the problems. It's like you want to explore different origins, you want to explore different processes, you want to explore different varietals, but you might buy you don't want to buy a full bag if you just want to try it. And so I think the Roasters Pack helped me explore different roasters, explore different countries, and see what I like and what I don't like. And that was the experience that we tried to create at the beginning, and we've built on that since. Now we're mailing thousands of boxes out each month, 10 years later.
Wow. Can you go back to 2014, your first month? How many orders came in? Do you remember?
So the first shipment, I made 20 boxes. So I took $1,000 out of my bank account and was like, okay, let's see what we can do. And so I made 20 boxes and I mailed them to bloggers and reporters.
Oh, wow.
And that was the start. So we luckily got some publicity off the hop, but it was slow. It was really hard to get this thing growing. And to be honest, I didn't know a ton about marketing or coffee. And so it was jump in the deep end. Let's see if we can figure this out. And it was mainly just me. I brought on a friend who was good at websites. So that was nice. He helped me build the website and do a bit of design stuff. But I didn't know how to do shipping, didn't know how to source coffees, didn't know how to do marketing. And so it was just jump in the deep end. Let's see if we can figure this out. So I feel bad, honestly, for the first few subscribers, because I think the pack probably wasn't the best representation of coffee. But after time, I think anyone who subscribed after the first 6 months probably got a decent product.
Take us through the process of you're reaching out to roasters or roasters are reaching out to you, and then you're tasting the coffee and putting this selection together. And what sizes are they coming in now? And
so at the beginning, it was just one version of the product, 3 different coffees from 3 different roasters, a 4-ounce bag. And I would reach out to roasters, taste the coffee, but I wasn't a Q grader or really even nerdy about coffee yet. So the nice thing about the Roasters Pack was that we did put a lot of effort into the content that went along with the coffee. So I got to spend an hour or so interviewing each roaster to do these write-ups. And that was my learning. I got to just follow my curiosity. So someone says, hey, this is a high grown coffee. Then I could ask them hey, tell me more about that. Why is that interesting? Why does that matter? And it was this guise of journalism, but it was just my education. And that was I went to the library, got every book I could get about coffee and just tried to learn as much as I could. Again, back in 2014, specialty coffee was still pretty new. So it wasn't that easy to learn. I think a lot of those James Hoffman books or Scott Rao books didn't really exist back then. And so it was really helpful for me to be able to interview Cole and then be hey, Cole, tell me about this. Tell me the story about how you went to XYZ farm and why was that interesting? And thankfully, there's people like Cole who love to ramble. And so I could just set them off and he would just teach me everything about coffee. And so that was a really cool experience for me because then it helped me just expedite my learning. And so I tried to keep getting better at sourcing the coffees, explaining what makes these coffees interesting. And I think we eventually got to a point where the product was pretty decent. But as you know, coffee is very personal. Each person prefers different coffees. And that was the next sort of challenge, is just how do we take in feedback from our customers to improve the product and make it better? So at the beginning, it was we have this one product, and maybe for about a year and a half or 2 years, it was this one specific product iteration. But then I would reach out to anyone who canceled their subscription and try and understand where we fell short, or anyone who maybe abandoned cart, try and figure out why didn't they place their order, try and figure out how we can make the product better. And so eventually we launched different versions of the Roasters Pack. So different sizes. A lot of people were canceling because it wasn't enough coffee. So we launched larger sizes. Eventually we launched different versions of the pack. So an espresso pack, a decaf pack. Now we have 4 different filter packs, depending on what type of coffees you like. 2 different espresso packs, depending on what type of espressos you like. Yeah, just kept trying to beef up the content to try and be that translator for if you're interested in coffee but don't know a lot yet, how can we make this as much of a straightforward process? We try to think of ourselves as your nerdy coffee friend. So if your friend who is really nerdy and into coffee just dropped off 3 coffees at your house, which coffees would they be? What would they tell you about it? And what would that experience feel like? And that's what we're trying to recreate, but in the mail.
So back in 2014, 2015, you're trying to understand coffee more. You're reaching out to customers if they're canceling. How are you growing the business? How are you getting subscribers? What's your, sales funnel? How are you, what are some of your tactical things you're doing? And maybe that comes later. Maybe at the start, it's not as strategic as we like to remember.
At the start, it was like chaos is what it felt like. So I was still running a videography and photography business. And there were times where we were pretty busy with that. And then there were times where like the roasters pack would feel kind of busy. But, at the beginning, I was packing every single bag, labeling every single bag, doing all the customer service, doing all the sourcing, doing all the write-ups, and then like trying to think about how do we grow this at the same time. And I think growth kind of falls on the back burner when you're just trying to like stay afloat. Like, how do we make sure everyone who orders what they ordered actually gets what they ordered? So like trying to create systems for logistics, which isn't really how my brain works, but like trying to figure all that out, keeping things organized. That was like the challenge of the first few years. At the beginning, I was pretty methodical about search engine optimization. That was like the main thing I was focused on, because if I could get good ranking for a few keywords, that's like a free way to acquire customers. Like, as I told you, we started this business with $1,000. So it's like, we didn't have money to like spend on marketing. So I was like, okay, search engine optimization, that's the thing we should try and focus on. And so I also tried to learn a ton about SEO.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you kind of got two jobs. When do you go all in full time? You stop, you got two side hustles going on at the same time. How does one kind of navigate that? Was there like a moment in time that, you got the biggest order ever and that was like, okay, I can quit this other thing and just focus on the roasters pack?
Yeah, there was like, Christmas is usually our busiest time for the roasters pack. A lot of people think like, hey, I know my friend or my Uncle Jim likes coffee, but I don't know what to get him. And so then December like 20th to 24th, a bunch of people land on the roasters pack site and they're buying last minute coffee gifts. And so I remember that January was like super intense for us because we were shipping out all these orders and I had like a really big videography project at the same time. And so I remember being up until like 5 a.m. just labeling coffee bags, like for a week straight, or like packing coffee boxes. And I'm like, what am I doing here? I need to figure out which one I want to spend my energy on. And the coffee was just way more fun for me. I realized like, this is where like I get excited. Videography isn't my passion, but like diving into coffee was like really fun. It was really easy to just like read these coffee books or like spend an hour interviewing these roasters. It didn't feel like work. And I think that was like a key sign for me. It's like, okay, this is really fun. So I think this is the project that I should dedicate the majority of my time to. That was essentially those 5 a.m. nights were like the moment where I was like, okay, I think I need to pick. And that's what led me to the roaster pack.
And I love reflecting at the start when it's like you're kind of knee deep in the shit and trying to, figure things out. What are some other things that you had to like overcome other than just like time management, the two jobs that were just like, I guess, tough challenges that like stand out in your memory?
Yeah, I think I remember like that like Christmas period when we were mailing out a ton of boxes and I was just doing so much like ops work. And it would feel like marathon sessions. Like, so Detour is really nice, which was really cool. So they let me use their weigh and fill, but they only let me use it like after work hours. So like I would go there from like 5:30 and there would be times where I'd be there till like 2 a.m. And I would bring all the coffee like in bulk bags, like from roasters that would ship to my house, drive it to Detour, use their weigh and fill, and then like bring all the packed bags back home at like 2 a.m. to my parents' basement. And then pack all the boxes. And then I would bring up like 200 to 300 boxes from my parents' basement and then pack it into their car and take like 3 trips to the Canada Post where like I would fill up their SUV with like it would just be like completely full with boxes. Wow. And that was pretty intense. Yeah. And so,
and you're doing this all alone?
Yeah, I was doing all this on my own. And like the first few years were like, I didn't know how to delegate. Delegation is a nice skill to learn, very helpful, but I hadn't figured that out yet. So it was like, just trying to figure everything out on my own, which was helpful, I think, because now I feel quite confident, like understanding how things work in my business. But I think I probably should have maybe delegated like a couple of years earlier, When
did you bring on the first employee?
Eventually we got into our own space. It wasn't our own space exactly. We're sharing a space with another coffee company. And I ended up hiring a head of ops. And so that was really helpful. He was helping me just like part-time pack coffee, label bags while he was in school. And after he graduated, I was like, hey, once you're done school now, like if this is something you'd be open to, let me know. Like we would love to have you join. And so he was my first full-time employee, which felt great because logistics is not necessarily like my like fun playground, and so that was really nice, just to get that off my plate and like pass that off to someone else.
Yeah, those growing pains your story is very similar to mine. Like I opened a cafe and I hired no one for the first 3 months and doing everything myself. And then finally brought someone on. It was like such a relief to like learn how to delegate. Cause you think, it's like, oh, I want to control everything. I want to control the experience. Yeah. Just, it makes me reflect 16 years later, 17 years later.
I remember like delegating like the labeling and then noticing like the labels were a little crooked. And it's like such a minor thing, but like after you've done like thousands of labels and you're like, you care so much, you put so much love into even something simple as labeling, and then you notice it and you're like, damn. And then you kind of decide like, how much do I want to micromanage here?
Yeah. I had that same feeling. I'd be like, oh, I can't leave the cafe because like the experience won't be as good. And then I remember thinking one day, it's like, no, I need to train other people to give the same experience. And it was just all of a sudden that mindset shift helped me get the company to the next step where it was like, yeah, I don't need to do everything. Like it's okay to let it go.
I was just gonna say, once you find someone that like you can trust, and then things are like operating and things are like, oh wow, okay, cool. Like I don't actually need to be here to support with ops. It feels like you're like, oh cool, we just like 2x'd what we can do. It's like, it sounds so like insane to say, but delegation, such an unlock,
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
What was it like during, the rise of home brewing during, COVID times? Was that a massive unlock for you guys? And did things kind of like 2-3x right then and there?
Yeah. I remember like January, I come up with like our plan for the year. And I was like, we're going to go after offices. Offices need better coffee. I think this is our big move, So we started like this process of like cold reaching out to offices January, February. And then like February, these like whispers of something happening. And then March, like the whole world shut down. I was like, okay, I guess offices don't exist anymore. I guess we'll scrap this plan. But yeah, of course, like people were stuck at home and then they were like, okay, well, I want to drink coffee still. All the coffee shops are closed. What do I do? And all that SEO work back in the day kind of came in clutch. And so people found us. We didn't really have to do too much to really like let people know like, hey, we're here and you should buy coffee from us. Like people just found us organically. That was like pretty huge for us. It was obviously like pretty scary too, because in the pandemic, you really didn't know what to be afraid of and what's okay, what's not okay. And you're like, hey, we're a food business. We're essential. We're okay. We can leave the house. Like I remember those periods of time where it was like, you can only leave the house if you're an essential employee and it's okay. We're running a food business. So this is fine. But then, how do you switch up your ops so that you have like multiple shifts of people and people are spread apart? And if one person on your team gets sick, do you have like the back coverage to handle it? So it was like great for us, especially considering like how it impacted like many other businesses in a very negative way, but it definitely had its own challenges in itself, which I guess every company had to try and sort and figure out.
Yeah, it was such a surreal time for us. It was, the cafes dropped 90% and our wholesale business as well, 90%. And then our retail web store went up like, I don't know, 6,000% or something crazy overnight.
Okay.
And not enough to offset the losses, but it was just such a shift in mentality and changes. Talk to me about like Leaderboard. And is that the time you guys created Leaderboard?
Yeah. So Grant, who's my co-founder on Leaderboard, he was doing events. Like that was his baby. It was like, how do I run really big coffee events? And obviously during the pandemic, none of those existed. So he was kind of like sitting around like, what do I do? And I was like, hey, like we have some stuff here at the Roaster Pack. Like we've always wanted to work together. Like we've talked about doing projects together, but like we've both been busy. I was like, I'd love to like have you join and help us with some stuff. And so he joined, and Grant and I are like, have a pretty friendly relationship. And so like we would have our meetings and we would just like kind of shoot the shit about different things going on and different ideas we had. And I had this idea like in the back of my mind, and it just like never left. And I was like, okay, I think there's something here. I don't know if you have this problem too, where you notice things and you're like, someone should do that, or maybe I should do that. And then like maybe the next day you're like, actually, no, that's kind of a bad idea. But then some ideas just like, they don't leave. I don't know if this is relatable or not.
I'm a one-track kind of guy. I'm not the creative type. So if Cole was here, he would be, oh yeah, I get it, man. I get it. But okay, so you guys are brainstorming, and then the idea is coming from you. Like, we're going to create this like competition. Maybe explain what Leaderboard is, and then.
Yeah. So I was really fascinated by the idea of cup tasters, but I've never done it, mainly because I'm kind of a wimp, but I'm like scared of like going on stage and tasting coffees in front of my peers and then like maybe being outed as like this guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm like, okay, this is a really cool competition, but like, is there a better way of maybe a competition? Maybe it could like test you on other things rather than just, can you tell the difference between these cups of coffees? Or maybe it can be educational as well, right? Like there's no education in cup tasters. It's testing is like, can you taste the difference? And as an industry that's like so focused on taste, you think there would be like more things around taste. And so I started like coming up with this like rough idea of like a coffee tasting competition where, you know, like when you're hanging out at a coffee shop or at a roaster with some friends, I feel like a very common game is someone brings you a cup of coffee and says like, hey, can you tell if this is a decaf or not? Or like, hey, what country do you think this is grown in? And that's a fun game to play with friends. And so we figured like, why don't we try and build this together into like some sort of at-home coffee tasting game? I remember going to cuppings with like roasters and they would taste and be like, oh, I could taste the loring on this. And I'm like, what? You
Right.
could taste the loring on this? Really? So we kind of brainstormed a bunch of interesting questions that would be fun to ask coffee professionals. And we like to joke that like Grant added his Grant spice. So Grant's like a branding guy. And I think it's interesting in coffee competitions, like you go to Barista Comp and it's like a really formal, serious competition. And Grant was like, hey, that's one angle we could take with this, but what if we tried to make it like a really fun, approachable competition? So Grant's concept was like this 80s, 90s arcade themed coffee game.
It's so cool. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's helped a lot. Like I think it really helps people feel like, oh, it's a game. It's not like this intense competition. It's more fun and serious. And then we just thought about like all the things that we wished we had in coffee that we could maybe put into this game. And so I was telling you about how I learned about coffee, where I got to like listen to a roaster or Cole, let's say, talk about processing. And I figured that could be really good to have on our site, like have these resources from professionals where they're breaking down like how does altitude impact the flavor of coffee? Or if you're tasting coffee from Burundi, like how would you know it's from Burundi? And so now we've got this like pretty in-depth resources section of Leaderboard where you're tasting these coffees, and if you feel lost, well, you can turn to one of these videos and hopefully it'll help you answer these questions. So that was another thing that we noticed. It's like, okay, competitions are like they're like, there's some interesting competitions, but they all are very like specific and they fit this one like type of competition. So like, how can we make competitions more fun? How can we make it educational? How can we make competitions like maybe something where it's like the entire world competing together? Like that's kind of a fun concept, especially during the pandemic. And so we just kind of brainstormed these ideas and it all came together in the culmination of Leaderboard, which like as an overview is you get 10 coffees blind and you have to try and figure out what they are. So you answer questions like, what country was this grown in? How was it processed? Is it a decaf? Was it grown above or below 1,600 meters above sea level? What varietal is this coffee? And then we do ask like specific section B questions, we call them, where we can just kind of point our flashlight on what we think is interesting going on in specialty coffee. So for example, last season we had a Robusta and we wanted to ask people to see if they could figure out which one the Robusta was. We also had a coffee that had been fermented with, I think, rose and lychee. And so that was like part of our section B questions, like, can you figure out which one that coffee was? And then we also had 2 coffees that were like the exact same green. And so roasted by different roasters. And so we asked the section B question, like, can you find the 2 coffees that are the exact same green? So yeah, it's just kind of fun to be able to like every quarter make this new version of the game where we get 10 coffees and we get to spotlight different interesting things going on in coffee. Now it's been about 3-ish years. We're mailing to about 40 to 50 different countries.
Wow.
And so it's pretty crazy to me that like people in like Thailand are competing against people in like Uruguay and like, I don't know, just like all over the world, people are playing this game and that's super fun to see.
Do you find our industry comparing it to wine maybe, where wine is like, oh, I can taste this certain flavor and that means it's from a certain country and maybe even this like certain area, versus coffee, it's much harder to identify it that way. And you guys collect like a lot of stats on, as an industry, can we even taste well?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Coffee is so hard, right? To nail everything, like varietal, processing, altitude, like origin. Like I'm sure you've had Colombians that could be confused as a Kenyan, or like natural coffees from like Central America that could taste, you could convince yourself they're an Ethiopian. And that's like the crazy thing about coffee is it's like, I feel like coffee as an industry is changing really quickly. Like 10 years ago, coffee was so different than what it is now. Now people are trying all these crazy different like fermentation techniques. Origin and terroir maybe is like becoming more blurred lines. And so that kind of comes to us where it's like, okay, how can we make a cool 10 coffee season that's educational, interesting, and like helps people feel like they're learning something about coffee? So if we had like a 10 natural Central American box, like I think you might not get that many takeaways from it.
Right.
But how do we make sure that like we have coffees that taste like a very good representation of what a washed Caturra from Colombia could taste like, or like a pink Bourbon from Colombia, or maybe like a rose lychee fermentation? Let's put our spotlight on what we think is interesting to showcase. So we have to be careful because you're right, coffee is like not as distinct, I think, as wine.
Do you like the blurring of the lines where it's harder to identify, or do you personally like it? Like, I taste this coffee. Oh, I know it's from Ethiopia. It's a beautiful representation of their coffee.
Yeah. So when we're like trying coffees, we always ask ourselves, like, could we figure this out? And if we can't, then we're like, okay, unclear if that's a fun coffee to put in the box.
Right.
And so there has to be something, some sort of clue. Like maybe this like rose lychee fermentation coffee, maybe there's like a little bit of something in the finish that lets you know that it's a Castillo. And like, okay, that's enough for us to put it in. But we have to be careful that we don't just have 10 coffees that are like incredibly difficult, because if you're new to coffee, that can feel like a little bit discouraging. And so how do we make the game in a way that's still a good educational process for people who are new to coffee, while still having like a high ceiling of skill that it can be differentiated between someone who's like good at tasting coffee and someone who's like really good at tasting coffee?
How many seasons have you put on now?
14.
Wow.
Yeah.
And many repeat winners? Any?
Good question. I feel like I should know this. I don't think there's been any repeat winners, but there have been like people who've gotten repeatedly top 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is cool.
And hard. How are people like diagnosing this? It's mostly based on taste, but you can like identify through looking at the coffee, making assumptions.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think visual cues are like pretty, if you look at a coffee, like David, I feel like you could probably tell whether it's washed or natural just by looking at it, right? Or if it's a decaf.
Don't try to expose me, man. I can't tell the Loring roast from the Probat roast, okay?
Well, so that was a funny question, right? So we had that at the beginning, because I would always go to cuppings and people were like, yeah, I could taste the Diedrich. And I'm like, what? Really? You can? And they're like, yeah. And so then we had that question in for like the first 6 or 8 seasons, and people were like, please remove this question. Like, it's like so hard. And so even the people who I remember cupping with claimed they could taste, and then I would look at their answers and be like, okay, well, maybe it's not as obvious as you were claiming previously.
Has there been any questions that have just, like, as an industry, we just can't quite pick up on?
Yeah, so I think roasting is one of them, where it's like really hard to tell what type of roaster someone would have roasted on. And I think what we learned is that it's more about like roast styles. So like people who roast on Lorings tend to roast on a specific style, which makes people think it's a Loring. However, other people on like Lorings do roast in different styles, which then may throw off like whatever you thought a Loring coffee tastes like. And so I think that was like an interesting learning, is like, oh, specific roasters don't have specific taste attributes that are like necessarily added to the coffee. And then I think like, yeah, like coffee, there's just so many blurred lines, right? Like processing can mask a lot of things. And so it makes it tough to like fully understand. I think at the same time, we still can like include some of these more challenging coffees as like interesting showcases of what that origin is capable of. So that's kind of the other fun thing about leaderboards. It's all blind. So you have no idea what these 10 coffees are. And maybe you have like a predisposed opinion on Peru or China or India as a coffee growing origin. You taste this coffee and it might like totally blow you away and surprise you that coffees from China can taste like this, or coffees from Myanmar can taste like this. So that is also kind of the fun thing about the blind format of the game.
Is there any questions that competitors usually answer quite well?
Yeah, I think probably some of the coffees where like, you know, the origins are like super distinct. I think a lot of people could probably pick out like the Kenyan acidity. Or like, I think processing is another one that is generally a higher scoring attribute, but origins are tough. Like there's so many like blurred lines now. Like how can you tell the difference between a Nicaraguan, a Peruvian, and an Ecuadorian coffee? Like unclear, you know?
Absolutely.
But you never know. Maybe you'll be able to like figure it out by process of elimination. You're like, okay, cool. There's like this specific varietal that I know like mainly only grows in Ecuador or Colombia. And then you can start putting the pieces together, which I think is also really helpful, like from a learning point of view, to understand like which varietals are commonly grown in these origins. So it's I don't know, it's a pretty interesting, fun game. It's been cool to like put it out there into the world and just see how people respond to it. And then just every season try and tweak it and improve it and ask different questions to make the game a better experience.
Yeah, we've played it, I don't know, four or five times. And every time it's a lot of fun. It's tough. I think we've won it once or twice. I can't remember.
Yeah. I
shouldn't say we. I didn't, I help a little bit, but
I feel like it was Cole's name. So even if you helped, he took full credit for it.
He'll put his name down regardless if he did it or not. So,
okay. Good to know.
You got these two companies. How do you balance your time between the two?
Yes. This is a question. I'm still trying to figure it out. Any pro tips, David?
No, man. No, I got none.
I would say it's been really helpful having a team. So now like got a head of ops, head of content, like head of customer service, essentially director of coffee. It feels good to know that like I can delegate and trust. And so that's been like really helpful. It's helped me free up like brain space to focus on like special projects or like different ways that we can push either the roast pack or leaderboard forward, which is like fun for me, which is great. But yeah, still trying to figure it out. Like I think there's so much that can always be done. Like just perpetually, and there's enough things to do, And so just trying to like balance that and prioritize and then figure out like where I should spend my energy.
What type of advice would you give yourself if you went back 10 years ago? What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, I think 10 years ago, I had no clue how to like prioritize my time. And I think, I don't know, at least me back in the day, like when I would be labeling bags until like 5 a.m. I'd be like listening to like business podcasts or something. And then someone would be like, you got to use Twitter. Then I'd be like, okay, I got to use Twitter. And I'd be trying Twitter and be like, okay, I don't know what Twitter's doing here for me, And I think it was helpful because I got to like dabble and try different things. But then eventually I sort of learned like what's ROI positive use of my time and what's not. So maybe that would be like my advice is like, it's good to dabble and it's good to try different things because then you learn what you like and what you don't like. But at the same time, then like reflect and kind of do like that post-game analysis of like, hey, what is working? What's not? What's like a useful way for me to spend my energy and time? Because it's like it's one of the most limiting resources that we have.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to always be forward-looking. You try something, you try Twitter, and then you got to analyze it. Did it work or not work? And I think a lot of people in the coffee industry don't spend enough time kind of seeing if something is working and gaining traction, or they pull the plug on it too early, or they do it for way too long and it isn't working. I think that's something, we could all learn from and kind of help us push us forward.
I will say though, like I think the Roasters Pack was like I continued on from like with like naive optimism. Like I think there was like a period between like year 1 and maybe like year 6 when like the logical decision would have been to stop doing this.
Yeah.
But then I think because I like got to a certain point where I was like, okay, now we finally have enough like orders to justify like having a full-time employee and then having like a second full-time employee. Like that like the first 6 years were just like so tough where it's like me trying to do a little bit of everything and feeling like I'm not really doing a good job on anything.
What do you think kept you going?
It was like optimistic naivety. It was like, it was like not logical, I don't think. But it worked out in the end, I think. So it's all fine.
I always think Seth Godin has a book called The Dip. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And it's kind of like you get excited, whatever, year 1 or day 1, you get excited about an idea. And then it's like, okay, after whatever a year, it's like, it becomes really hard. And you go through this like valley of whatever he calls it, death, and then it's like, then once you go through it, most people quit there. That's kind of the end of their road. But if you make it through that, then it's like you go up the ramp and you get excited. And yeah, I love hearing that type of stuff because it's, I listen to a lot of podcasts and it's like you hear, the $100 million company and everything's, amazing. And it's like, no, where were you when it was like you were knee deep, like in the shit? And how did you keep going? Like, tell me about that so I can apply that to my life. Like, not just the, nice, shiny, glorious stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. How do you find yourself balancing all your time?
Coming back, like we traveled a bunch and trying to come back into the business when, I've been at arm's length for a while is, it's like a new challenge kind of, and trying to figure out my place with it without like inserting and like making all these decisions. So Balance, I think if you really want to strive or get ahead in certain aspects in life, there has to be no balance. When I started Rosso, it's like I lived, breathed, everything in my life was around it for, I don't know, 12 straight years. Like, and it's just now that it's like, yeah, I get some time to go away and breathe, but you have to be dedicated at your craft to really excel. It's not, you don't become the best in anything by doing it, part-time. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
I mean, I can see that though. It's like, you guys did that world tour. It was like how many different stops in like such a short amount of time. You guys just you go in the deep end, make it happen.
I think that's also part of it. It's like when you go, you got to go hard and in whatever it is. And that's like the commitment I think we've had with coffee ever since we've kind of started. It's like we take competition very serious, and some people think it's, a waste of time. And that's like, there's times where I think it's a waste of time. We see enough value coming out of it that we continue to go back and back. And same with the roasting business or forward. So it's like, I don't know if balance or like, I don't know if there's such thing with if you really want to get ahead, if balance can come into play. It's like, you got to go hard.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no balance.
You're not supposed to interview me, man.
Well, it's happening now. Okay. But this leads to your previous question. Okay. So it's all tied together. You asked me how I balance the Roasters Pack and Leaderboard and how I split my time. Right. And so this is something that I'm trying to figure out, because I agree. Like, I think sometimes you do have to just go like spend a lot of energy and effort and focus to try and make something happen. But then when you have multiple projects, so like for yourself, you have like wholesale, you have your cafes, you got forward, you've got the coaching and competitions. You can't focus all in. I guess, like, how do you make sure all 5 are working when you're trying to go all in and there's no balance, but you can't focus on every single one,
Yeah. Then it comes back to like surrounding yourself with people that are running that aspect of the business. And a lot of people know Cole and I, but the key person is neither of us. It's Jessie, our third business partner. She's
Cool.
running Rosso, she's running Forward. And then it's the team in those companies that are in charge of marketing, in charge of the cafes, in charge of roasting and wholesale, that it's their part of the business to own. And we, as leaders, it's like you need to empower your people to run that part and support them as much as you can, while at the same time pushing them, which is a very fine balance of support. We like to say firm but fair. You've met Dan. I give Dan, our wholesale manager, a tough time. It's like you gotta constantly press. Or like when we're coaching people, we coached 4 people for World Championship, and we're doing 12-hour days. We're pressing hard. Everything is focused on that, and everyone around us, we're trying to lift up our standards, and they're lifting up theirs, and it all kind of cycles, and you get the flywheel, and we all kind of move up and get motivated to go and do the next thing.
Cool. Nice.
Okay. No more question. You can't ask me any more questions here. I'm supposed to be interviewing you, buddy.
I mean, I think that is really interesting though. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would love to get to that point. I think maybe this is an excuse, but it feels like, Leaderboard specifically is still like pretty early days, that we don't have like a person who's like, you own Leaderboard. This is your area. And so it's like, it's kind of a mix between like myself, Grant, and Dustin, who's like our director of coffee at the Roasters Pack, but he's also heavily involved in Leaderboard. And so, it's kind of the challenge of like, how do we run both of these? And I think still trying to figure that out.
It's hard. I don't know if it ever gets kind of fixed, and I don't know what the answer is. Like, I know Elon's kind of like a controversial guy nowadays, but it would be interesting. He's got so many companies. It's like, how does he spend his time and balance? Or if you ask him, he would say there is no balance. It would be like he's all in on all of them.
Yeah.
And how do you handle that? I don't know the businesses that well, but it's like, you need someone owning it, because then as we were talking about hockey earlier, the puck stops with them. Then someone can, drive the future, or like the funnel or the sales funnel, whatever their job is there, as much as possible. So I think that's for us, balancing each part of the business, because they are so different. And once they get to a certain size, I think it's like, you can't be doing 3 parts of the business. It's like you're doing one part of it and you just own it and like get after it as hard as possible. Okay. Future facing. What's next for both the Roasters Pack and Leaderboard?
Yeah. I mean, last year, the Roasters Pack, we made a lot of changes. So we fully like rebranded. I remember like you came to Toronto, we were talking a bit about that. We fully redid our website and like as an e-commerce store that's like pretty significant. And we launched new versions of our subscription. So like still 10 years in, like launching more versions, talking to customers, trying to figure out how we can make the Roasters Pack better. We improved the content. So every coffee has like a brew guide. That's like a good starting point. It's just like, hey, people were talking about that, or customers were asking for it. It's like, cool, why don't we do that? And so now we feel like really good about the Roasters Pack as a product. I think like for me, I love like thinking about product, but I think like that is not the unlock for the Roasters Pack to get to the next level. Have you heard of a coffee subscription company called Trade Coffee?
Yeah.
So they're in the States. They're doing pretty good in the States. They're doing a pretty good job. The reason I bring that up is because if you compare their numbers to our numbers and you like equivalent the population, so like Canada's 10% of the States.
Yeah.
However, we're still like significantly smaller than Trade, even if you like do the population equivalency. So what that tells me is like there's a lot of room for us to grow. And so this is like our current challenge. Is like, how do we get the word out there? How do we let people know like, hey, we're doing something really cool and we think you'll like it? And that's what we notice is like people, when they start subscribing, they like usually stick around, or they'll stick around for a bit. They'll get some coffees that they like, try a roaster, they'll go to that roaster, and then like maybe they'll come back after 6 months. And so we feel pretty good about our product. It's just the next question is like, how do we keep getting the word out there? And so this is our current challenge.
What would you do if I gave you $10 million tomorrow?
Is this a real offer, David? Because okay. What would I do? I think I would be like, I mean, that's a great question. I think I would just double down on everything. So like we'd go harder on like organic social. We would be testing a lot of different Facebook ad creative. We'd be doing a lot more in-person stuff. So we'd probably end up having like our own physical location. That's like a billboard for the Roasters Pack. So if like our Roasters Pack Cafe breaks even, that's fine because it's not about the profitability of the coffee shop. It's about the growth of like the company. I would be investing in like growing offices now.
The office play comes back.
The office play comes back. Yeah, I would probably do a lot more like influencer work. I think influencer work works better for companies based in the States because I imagine like more people online are from the States. With Canada, it's like kind of a limited market. We would test like anything and everything. Like, can we do billboards? Like, do they work? Like, who knows, right? And just see what happens. Podcast ads, yeah,
everything.
Whereas now I'm like, okay, I need to make sure if I put $1 out there, like it's like going to the right spot. Whereas like, I can't just like test a $2,000 podcast ad spot, you know?
Have you ever thought about, again, we can cut this all out, but have you ever thought about, I feel like you guys would do so well with like crowdfunding.
Really?
I don't know. I just feel like I've seen your ads where you got like the little mini mic and you're going around and they want to hear like the story and the grind and all that. And then also it's a product that's like tangible. They could get it every month. It reminds them that they like either own some or get like perks or whatever, you know, you kind of, I don't know. It's
okay. That could be interesting. Should I do a Kickstarter?
I don't know, man. I have no idea. I don't go on Kickstarter. I have no idea, but I don't know. It just seems like it might be a good. You don't seem enthused, so we'll
that could be interesting. No. I'm open to it. I'm like, the wheels are turning right now. I'm pondering it.
It's like Patreon. For $3 a month, you get this extra post, and I'm kind of thinking like, who's subscribed into this stuff? But there's people love it, and like they want more access, so they want to get to know you more, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like I don't know. I feel like it could be a good alley for you guys.
I mean, one of the things that we're trying to do is like tell more of the story and like show more of the behind the scenes. And it's like, okay, I had to learn to get comfortable being on socials, you know. I think that's like definitely makes a lot of sense. Like people want to know the people behind like the companies they support. So Kickstarter would just, or like a Patreon type thing where you just get more access. I think that like lines up. we just need to get more comfortable creating a lot more content.
Yeah, it's like the content becomes its own monster that you got to kind of feed the beast, and having a team around that. We're trying to figure that out. It's like content, man, is, you know, people make fun of content creators, but it's like that is obviously it's like a certain skill set that does very well, but it's like that's a hard job and a hard business.
Yeah, totally.
But when you
takes so much time.
Hit it big.
Yeah, I had some friends who've like basically built their whole business off of like organic TikToks or like organic Instagram reels. which is like crazy, but they just like know how to get into the algorithm in that right way. And like, that's amazing, right? It's like, you can just find this channel where you don't have to pay to acquire customers.
Yeah. The power of social media is unreal.
Yeah.
I don't have that power, but there's lots of people. You got
the podcast?
Yeah. The 42 people that are going to listen. Okay. It's higher than that. I promise. But yeah, no, it's the power of social media is incredible. It can be for really good or some not so good things.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think I've like accepted I need to make more a part of my life. Like for the Roasters Pack and personally, if we want to get like nerdy about business a little bit, there's like, it's an asymmetric bet, essentially, right? It's like the downside is zero, except like maybe a bit of time. The upside is like kind of
massive.
Yeah.
I see you're wearing a Whoop.
Yeah.
Do you like it?
I like it. I got it like 6 months ago. I think it's fun. I like nerding out about like the data, and I don't know how much it's like changed my life, but I think it's fun to look at. You know, I don't know if that's
data, but who cares?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, actually, that's true. I try to drink more water. Hydration is really good for my recovery.
Yeah.
You know, I got my vitamins. You know, taking more vitamins now.
Nice. How's the sleep?
Sleep could be better. But it's good to know, right? Like, hey, my sleep debt, I got to put some work in. And then the weekend comes around and I'm like, I'm sleeping in. The alarm's not coming.
I'm putting the work in.
Yeah. Or like eating meals before bedtime.
Oh, yeah.
It's really bad for the recovery.
Do you drink?
I tried to drink less now.
Yeah.
You know, because now I see like how much it negatively impacts, like, which makes sense.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal on the HRV and resting heart rate.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy. How can listeners find you?
Add me on Whoop and we'll compete. The Roasters Pack Leaderboard is the next season's coming up soon. And so if you want to challenge yourself, do like a fun team building activity, see how good you could taste coffees, maybe win some prizes, check out Leaderboard Coffee. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it.
You gonna plug Roasters Pack or what?
The Roasters Pack? Yeah, but your listeners are international, you know? The Roasters Pack is pretty Canadian.
I see.
I feel like you got that global listenership.
Yeah, I get these like notifications where we're big. It's like South Korea.
Okay,
we're pretty big in Brazil.
Nice.
I think Indonesia's we're gonna pop off. We just released the podcast with Miki, so I think we'll be big there. Canada still number one though. Number one in our hearts.
Nice. Yeah, Leaderboard. We signed a decent amount to South Korea. There's like a hub there, which is pretty fun. Like this group of people put on like a tasting, which is, it's pretty cool to see like 30 people trying Leaderboard in one go.
Oh, wow.
And also Hong Kong is like really big into Leaderboard.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys noticed that when you were in Hong Kong, like the coffee culture there seems to be pretty next level.
Dude, they're dialed. We were there for PMQ and the average person that came up knew a lot. Like they described themselves as coffee lovers. And they're like, oh yeah, I know Jansen. I had Jansen last year. And
cool.
It's like, it was, unbelievable. So that's not surprising.
Nice. Yeah. So Leaderboard, if you're in Canada, you can try the Roasters Pack. It's a really cool way to discover different coffees. Those are the plugs.
Sweet, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for
of course
sharing your story, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks, David.
Hey, look at that. You've made it. Thanks for listening to By the Drip. If you could please subscribe, rate, and give us a comment, that'd mean the world to me. Till next time.